their Twitter handles in order: at Deveo Okorie, at Adedunmade, allegedly also the 2014 governorship election in Ekiti State. Also, they say that perhaps he's also being under probe, and it's a very interesting debacle that he finds himself in the middle of. So through the story.
Yes. Just like you said, it's quite interesting. And there are 5 billion. Now that matter has been in the Federal High Court in 2005, transferred from the to the Lagos division of the Federal High Court. Now there were rumors time in 2016 that Governor Fayose had been what I would say released from the allegations by the court, but there are other stories that say contrary. And of course, because he's still going to court now, that means that those informations were false. But however, the conduct of the EFCC is also in focus here. For instance, there's the issue of the EFCC tweet, which came out a couple of months ago.
Yes.
There's also the issue of there's a statement that I read alongside the story here, which quotes an EFCC source as saying that upon his questioning, that he is expected to be arraigned. Now, this already presupposes that the EFCC have already found him guilty and most likely are just trying to confirm this in the court of law. Now, the last issue, which is not the least, of course, is the suit against the EFCC by Governor Fayose himself, where he's asking for 20 billion for breach of his rights. Now,
yes.
what he has said here is that they have put him on security watch, and that is against his right as a sitting governor, as he is still covered by immunity as provided in the Constitution. Now, I remember seeing a tweet from this week when someone said Fayose is the safest person in Nigeria now because everybody is watching him. The DSS, the police,
really,
and every
it's
other
very
person.
scrutinized.
Yes. Now, there's also the underlying issue of him going to the APC, and which is also being very vehemently denied by the APC. Some are saying they're not going to accept him. Even he is saying he's not going to go to the APC no matter what. So Fayose's story is very interesting, and I'm sure Nigerians are watching to see what comes out at the end of it. Me personally, I can't wait to see what happens in court on all these allegations back and forth, and see if he's even going to go to the FCC office at first on October 16th.
But here's a question I have, almost as a bit of commentary. Thank you for going through that story in quite good detail. Is the fact that they say they've set up a special team to interrogate Governor Kayode Bakare, and that's the word they keep using, interrogation. It
Yes.
sounds very intimidating. It's not asking questions.
Yes, I'm quite appalled by the use of that word because it's used not only by the EFCC but also by the police. Now, when you invite someone for questioning, you can use that term, okay, he's been invited for questioning, there's some questions we're investigating. But when you say you're interrogating, it just seems like, you made up your mind and you're just trying to witch hunt the person. But let's see what happens. Fayose solely Peter the Rock is an interesting figure in himself, and let's see what turns out at the end of the day.
Thank you very much for that, Adedunmade. Lagos and the rest of the world, don't forget that hashtag on Twitter is FreshlyPressed981, and the WhatsApp number to message is 0809 444 0981. Up next, let's move over to the Daily Times for this story. Again, the National Assembly and legislative aides are protesting non-payment of salaries and allowances. This was the welcome back that the National Assembly received, where there are aides, about 50 of them, and basically led by Nyako Etuk, saying owed about 2 months and duty tour allowances since about 2015. A number of issues raised where they say they have complained to management, and every time they do, they're told, we're working on it. They talk about a lack of training that they're supposed to have for a year, but they've never had any, not even one. Yet we do see members of the National Assembly flying back and forth for all sorts of things. Deveo, your thoughts on this story, please?
Campaigning and looking big. It's not even right in the center of where the power lies that they're the short end of the stick. And here the National Assembly workers who had been protesting even while they were on recess had more or less staged a more a clearer protest right at the gates of the National Assembly, where both the Representative House and the Senate House are entered into. And they said there's about an outstanding of about 5.8 billion, which arises from about 2 months salary arrears, duty to allowances, that's DTA, and then other entitlements that's not been paid since, like the DTA, which has not been paid since 2015. Now, they mentioned that the last administration, that was the 7th Senate, that was when David Mark was presiding, had ensured that their DTA was paid, and that the training that they're meant to receive 4 in a year, they've not even gone on one
Not
since
one.
2015. This is quite alarming because it is their entitlement, it is their right, despite the fact that the National Assembly had voted a budget of about, I think, 139.5 billion, up from about 100 billion in 2017. So, who are the critical players here? Dogara did arrive while the protest was going on, and he just tiptoed away into his own abode. While Ndume, the majority leader, when he came in, he was like, "Well, guys, you know me. If you will, I stand." So he posed with the placard with him,
Wow.
and
It's a
shots
good
were
photo
snapped.
op. A good
Yes,
photo op there.
ops. But this speaks smack down about good governance. If you can't do it in your own abode, how much governance are you pushing to the people? And are we surprised that at the end of the National Assembly has been challenged in terms of its performance as to whether it's up to this democratic arrangement? So we're hoping that they can resolve this in time. As you do know, the senators do not work of themselves. They do not work in isolation. They do of assistants and parastata that work with them to be able to their due efficiently.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Deveo. Up next, we move on to this next story. Gbolahan, I believe I'm coming to you for this one. Buhari writes the Senate and seeks approval for $86 billion Eurobond. Now, this amount is there. He's requesting the National Assembly's resolution to raise that amount of money from the international capital market for part funding of the 2018 budget. Now, that are contained in this as well, not just the Eurobonds, but in the same letter, he's also sought the legislative nod for an external capital sourcing of $4 million to refinance of $500 million matured Eurobonds in the international capital market. Also, looking at requesting the Senate to confirm the appointment of Olanipeku Olukoyede as Secretary of the EFCC, and pending confirmation of Ibrahim Magu, who has been acting chairman of the EFCC from time to time. But what are your thoughts, especially considering that we've only got a few months left for 2018 when we look at this Eurobond?
Well, it's very interesting. It seems like, the president has been busy while the National Assembly has been on break. It's been bombarded approvals and requests from the president. Just as you've mentioned, we're talking about Eurobond approval. We're also talking in this article, he also mentions that the president is also seeking approval for 304 naira for a 2018 budget proposal for the Niger Delta development. There's also some other approvals as well too that he's also seeking for as well. He's also talking about an approval for executive bill tied to the suppression of piracy and other maritime offenses as well.
Now let's note as well for the public listening that a lot of these requests had come in quite earlier in the year. July was the earliest, through July, some in September.
So, but when we're looking at the main article, it's talking about the 2.78 billion fund or loan that we're asking for again as well too, and we're talking about it for the 2018 budget. Right now, at the moment, we're in the final quarter of 2018. So how much is being done from the 2018 budget at the moment? Of course, we know we had the problems anyway from 2016, 17, but all into 2018 is that we're also going to carry on 20 until halfway through 2019. So which means the budget would actually carry on into the following government, if it's going to be Buhari or I don't know, whoever the president will be, it will carry on into that. But seriously, we're talking about debt, and last time I think it was on Monday, you were also talking financing internationally, and it costing a lot more now. We're talking about borrowing more money internationally now. Of course, it's going to cost a lot more now because of the US rate, which has actually been going up over. There's been 3 US rate hikes now. So, of course, we're going to be borrowing more. And what we're talking about now, we're talking 1 trillion naira. So, the already 2 trillion naira loan that we have on Nigeria.
And that leads us very nicely into our next story from ThisDay newspaper. The IMF are predicting 13.5% inflation for Nigeria in 2019. That is right. So the counselor and director of the research department for the IMF, Maurice Obstfeld, came out with this on Tuesday. It was during the unveiling of the fund's World Economic Outlook at the ongoing annual meetings that were held recently. Inflation in the country climbed to 3% in August, 11.14% that was. However, inflation in Nigeria to fall to 12.18 from 0.5% in Deveo.
More or less some kind of prognosis from the they were having their Bali, Indonesia.
It's a nice place for
very
meetings.
Nice place
It's
to be.
a good meeting spot.
Yes. So after that, in their forecast and analysis for Africa, they did mention on average that African inflation had softened, coming from 2016. It had dropped from 11% to about 8.5, and now, 8.6, and now about 8.5. So in a way, things were getting better in terms of density, although at a slow rate. They did mention that inflation was also sought. This was strong policies tightening and moderation. That was between us and Angola. Now, when we break that down a bit, we do remember that the CBN, during the Monetary Policy Committee meeting, they had maintained a 14% policy rate, which was intended to avoid inflationary pressures coming from rising consumer prices and exchange pressures due to increased importation. As you do know, that when there's increased importation, it means many of the traders will be seeking dollars or foreign exchange that in, which puts pressure on the naira, which drives up the price inevitably. So the balance of where the sends an indicator as to how we can kind of moderate this. Also, I also know that the exchange rate, it has been a position of pressure, which is why to balance availability of FX to kind of keep the price stable for a while. So the difference between the official and what you receive at the black market has been marginal, which has given some decent level of stability. Now, also, they've also kept it at that rate to also keep rates attractive for investment, especially in the many bids, both by state and federal, attract investment. At the end, I think for not just inflation, keep the economy the growth plan. We heard Madakavo, Minister of Hazina Bahame, seat here, your fiscal the role you're taking, and enter you in the device, which capacity with a bit of sacrifice, but at the end of the day, it will empower us. Or we intend to maintain our high imported lifestyles, or high imported capacity, or high imported borrowed growth. The choice is ours.
All right. Thank you very much for that, Devon. We move on.
All right, so coming to you, Adedunmade, with this next one. This one says EFCC blocks Justice Nyako hearing of 12 cases involving Magu confirmation, and we took this from the Daily Times. So the story goes, the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, in a move to block Justice Nyako of the Federal High Court, Abuja Division of Hearing cases seeking the removal of acting chairman of EFCC, that's Ibrahim Magu, from office, has written to the court to transfer 17 separate suits relating to the case from her court. And well, they're basically saying that the reason is because the commission is prosecuting the spouse and stepson, namely Admiral Murtala Nyako and Senator Abdulaziz Nyako, respectively. Your thoughts, Adedunmade?
Yes, the EFCC is prosecuting both persons, which are of course tied to his lordship. And when I first saw the headline, I was wondering, is this a case of abuse of powers or something on behalf of, on the part of the EFCC? But on going through the stories, I realized that it was not. And what they have requested for is actually fair, because Admiral Nyako and his son are on trial for allegations of fraud going into the tune of about 29 billion naira. Allegedly, they used 5 companies to take these funds out of the government coffers between the years 2012 and 2013. Now, there is another part of the story by Daily Post which says that his lordship has actually withdrawn from the case and has adjourned them indefinitely till the Chief Judge is able to another Buhari. But it's also quite interesting as an FTC and Nyako matters that is the son, actually took EFCC to court on the grounds that one, they had locked his office and premises since 2014, and also that the freezing of his account was wrong and unlawful. Now, the court gave a judgment sometime in about June or July, where the court ordered the EFCC to freeze his account for the reason that the freezing in the first place was unlawful and oppressive, and also ordered that his premises be opened. But now back to the case of Justice Nyako, I'm glad to see that she has herself withdrawn from the case, and I think it's just in the interest of justice the actions that she's taken. So now the matters will be going before another judge. I don't know how long that's going to take, especially when you think of the fact that the judicial process is not as a lot of us who want it to be. Now, there's also an application before the court for a consolidation cases, which I think is actually fair, so that all of them at the same time. But that in itself is now going to lead to more complications in trying to get all the parties together for all 17 cases, because I'm guessing that all the parties are going to amount to about 20. When you think about all the defendants and all the cases have about 3 or 4 parties in them, so even 20 might even be a small number. So I don't know how long this is going to take. Of course, the EFCC acting chairman has had issues with his confirmation for so long. Now it's been in court and it's dragging, and I'm sure Nigerians just want to see a resolution of this matter, especially since the tenure of the current administration is going to end in a couple of months. And I think a law should be passed that states how long a person should
Act in.
rule.
Close to 4 years already.
Yes.
All right, I'm sure that the National Assembly will be looking into that based on their experience so far. But we've got a few messages to get through very quickly. IK says, since the EFCC have chosen to play games, I wish them luck as they continue on the path of ignominy, he says. While we've got this next one coming in from Anya Kanya, he says the EFCC at the end of the day will have no clear facts to use to prosecute Fayose. How many cases have they actually won? They should put their house in order. If he defects to APC, he becomes born again and all things pass away. There is God, he says. While this one in from DSK says, something bothers me with all the billions that the preceding administration had requested and gotten approval for, as well as the many billions by this current one. It should make the country discount. Yes, it should, how it works in general. And IK comes back in to ask on justice, mean that no grant her because her son have a tea. Let's keep it moving.
So this next one, it says here the whole abuse of Tramadol, and this comes from the Vanguard newspaper. Now, giving you details, it says the enforcement agency what it termed the high level of a cough syrup among women. The NDLES chairman, Mohammed Abdullah, said this while delivering Nigeria's statement on crime prevention, criminal justice, and world drug problem at the UN General Assembly in New York.
Well, it was almost like a term sheet, a defense of what Nigeria had been doing to address some of the issues surrounding crime prevention, criminal drugs. This was administered skillfully by Colonel Mohammed Abdallah, that's the current NDLES chair. So he spoke and raised many issues, how Nigeria, through national initiatives, through development, to address the situations around, which I will list out. On the top of the list, the issue of the codeine diet menace, that's the abuse of cough syrups, tramadol, even paracetamol in some rare cases by vulnerable youth and women. And if you remember this, a heavy issue earlier in the year when I think there was a report on it that kind of blew it out in the open. Now, he did also mention that there is a linkage between drug abuse and crime prevention, so that this was being addressed by various initiatives, especially at the local levels. Secondly, he did mention that that there was implementation of the National Drug Control Master Plan between 2015 and 2019, which was robust, which was meant to address the supply and demand of illicit drugs across the country, and also counter money laundering issues. One of those initiatives was Unplugged, an evidence-based school preventive program targeted at youths between the ages of 10 and 14, which had been instituted in about 16 schools for the pilot project. There was also legislation and proper guidelines produced to address the supply of drugs used for narcotic drugs, psychotropic substances, and precursor chemicals used for medical and scientific purposes. As you do know, a debate for medical marijuana has come to Nigeria, but for those of us who know how to grow hashish and ginger in our various locations, well, I think that debate is coming soon. Then he also highlighted the issue of how on the anti-corruption side, that in presidential mandate in ending corruption, that this was so touted, especially to the extent that the AU did work hard making Muhammad Buhari, that's our president, the African anti-corruption year man, which was meant to assist some of the money laundering issues that we had faced. Finally, he also said that Nigeria was working in synergy with a lot of international bodies, Interpol, etc., and co, to address some of the leakage and the legal problems faced in crime prevention on a continental level. And then we were also reintroduced into the Egmont Group because we passed the Financial Independence Act, which gave autonomy and independence to the Nigerian financial unit. So this is some report card. We will either give a check or an X as to whether we feel the effect has been on all and each and every one of us.
A lot of report cards coming to the end of this administration.
Real quick, David, let's quickly lead you into this one again. Also from the Guardian newspaper, this says nation may miss 2030 food security target. Excuse me, Gbolahan. So this comes to you. And giving you an insight, it says increasing cases of flooding, conflicts and climate change are putting in jeopardy efforts by the federal government to achieve zero hunger by 2030. This is from the Food and Agriculture Organization. They warned this.
Yes. Well, I'd like to start by asking, what exactly, is Nigeria? Are we meeting any of our targets on any objectives that has been set to us? We're talking about a lot of poverty eradication. This is one of it as well, to missing the target of food security by 2030. And of course, this was actually raised by the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is another arm of the United Nations. And what they do is just, generally going around the world to ensure food security and zero hunger as well. So they've raised this, and it's something that we all know was going to happen, or something that we're all worrying about. We're not even talking about 2030. We're probably even looking at 2019, 2020, because just a few days ago, the Minister of Agriculture also mentioned as well that there might be issues or shortages of rice in the country, even though we're talking about producing about 90% or how many percent of our consumption capacity, maybe not up to 90, but something very high. Also, but the other issue is obviously when we're talking about food security, there's a lot of government policies that isn't actually helping as well. How many silos have we actually built in Nigeria? These are all the things that we all need to be considering as well too. And of course, the flooding is a major issue. How do we counter it?
All right, Real the next one with you, Adedunmade fraud. court orders processes to be served on Oshiomole. This is from the EFCC. We took the story from Daily Times. Your thoughts in general?
Yes, basically, there's an order of mandamus that has been filed before the court, which basically means that an order of mandamus is an order asking the court to compel the government agency to carry out a certain act. So in this situation, they're trying to compel the EFCC to investigate the APC chairman, Adams Oshiomole. Now, it's also quite interesting that the court has ordered that the applications and the matters and the processes to be served on the parties, that is Adams Oshiomole and the EFCC, because the matter was brought by an ex parte application, which means that you can go to the court on your own without involving the other party, because you believe that the court can make a decision on that issue without having to involve the other party, who even may be named or cited or indicted in the case before the court. So what the court has said now is, you know what, I don't want to hear this matter without them, since the case borders basically on actions done by Adams Oshiomole, and since it's seeking to compel the EFCC, I would like for them to also be parties to the suit. So he has ordered that the processes be served on them so that they too can also come and state their position. I think this is in the issue of fairness, but also I also wonder why the EFCC is not as brazen or is not as excited to take on this challenge as they have taken up the Fayose challenge.
Okay.
All right. On that note, we've come to the end of Freshly Pressed for this morning. Unfortunately, we are just out of time there, so I'll round up with a couple of messages. Jay Shadow from Ikotun says, it seems that the EFCC is now a political party in Nigeria. Do they really need such propaganda ahead for someone on the watch list? I think it is better for them to wait for the right time of action against the offender rather than making so much noise. Arota sends in this quick one saying food security target missed, UNESCO education budget target missed, anti-target missed. The only target that we hit in Nigeria seems to be the missing target. All right. Thank you very much to our analysts for coming in this morning. Find Deveo as Deveo Okorie up on Twitter. Adedunmade is simply that name on Twitter at Adedunmade, and Gbolahan is at Mr. G Quest. Coming up next at 8:15, we will be talking sports inside the locker room. So make sure you send in those comments using that hashtag LockerRoom981. Good morning.
Two notes from Page Financial.
Okay.
Page Financial.
Mr. Baker.
You further.
I hope that rain is not causing a lot of traffic now.
It has, though.
Insert.
Don't even think about it.
Insert. Oh no. You know, take picture today.